Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing about that. Now we'd like to come to your professional journey that you've had, right? So, do you remember your very first day at the very first job that you joined?
Very, very, very much. So, I don't think my profile covers that. Neither my resume would cover that. I started working in my second year. You know, I used to play for. I did my engineering from Mysore University. So I used to play for state then, the zone, the university as well. I used to represent the cricket teams. So I remember as part of our second year, we had to do projects from our second year as well. Every year you do a good project that will enhance your capabilities and skills in engineering. So I started looking around for a job and as for a project in fact, and one of the sports management companies in Bangalore by a well-known reputed cricketer used to run that. The software was still used by BCCI until the foreign companies came over. It was a sports and a cricket gaming software company. So they said, why would you want to just do a project? Why don't you work for us on a probation? So they offered me that, and I remember the first day I came there, I was definitely hassled, You had that elderly respect and, walking in. I remember seeing this interview of Sourav Ganguly on one of the leadership forums post-retirement. It's probably available on YouTube. You'll see that the guy talks about the first thing that you want when a player comes in to the team, Indian cricket team. It's 15 people out of 1.3 billion people playing for the team, right? And what do you want to do is create that approachability. He's coming in, he's not going to be, wow, apprehensive about looking at some of the top stars in the dressing room, right? That's the first thing that he did as a leader. That definitely wasn't the case when I worked, So I remember it was apprehensive, not just the first day, for the first few weeks, it was actually tough. A 17-year-old puny little kid.
Yeah, to
settle in was damn difficult. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so.
Now, as for your LinkedIn, so now you clarified that. Now, you were a team lead at Hurix Digital in Chennai, and then you moved to Mumbai, and you've been here ever since. I'm not so sure right now, but what convinced you to move here, and how is it? So, what convinced you to move from Chennai to Mumbai?
Yeah, a good question. In fact, Hurix was headquartered here, by the way. So, when I joined in 2002, I remember that was my first job, and I joined in actually as a team lead. You're right. My first job, because I had almost 2.5 years of experience before in college, I actually joined them. They were a fairly small company, 70, 80 man organization, and we were setting up a business or a captive or a unit in Chennai. So I actually joined here for a month or two before I moved to Chennai, But the first thing I remember when I came in here was, and I took an auto rickshaw from the airport to get to Andheri, where the office was. And I remember, sitting in an auto rickshaw and being very apprehensive that this guy is going to fleece me. Just like what it happens in Bangalore, any of the other cities, it just doesn't happen here. You realize how enterprising the city is, and Mumbai has taught me a lot. I've been here, very, very, very difficult to move out of this city. Once you're used to it, it just grows on you, just like wine would grow on someone who drinks wine. But I think it's resilient. That's what it's taught me. It's taught me to be entrepreneurial. It's taught me to be very enterprising. And of course, the habit of working hard, right, is
that comes
absolutely. And this changed, my view of Mumbai changed because of these 2 months. And I'll be honest, I want to share something that down south, living in Mumbai is like, wow, this guy lives in Mumbai. That's still, people have that. People put that aura around you if you live in Mumbai. It's still there, Probably not so much for US. A lot of people from down south go to the US, but in Mumbai, wow, this guy lives in the US. It's still there.
The one with the
halo around.
Interesting. Now, after a few stints in IT companies, you also started your own venture. Yeah. So, what was that venture about? What made you start it? And
yeah, so look, one of the things that I did share that before, that I love creating things. I want to be creative in any job that I take, right? And thankfully, pretty much every organization that I work for had allowed me to express myself, pretty much always. So what that means is that I've always been an intrapreneur in companies. I was never told top down, you do this, here are the opportunities, how do you think you would approach it, or what would you want to do? It's always been the case. That's always been that mutual respect when I've kind of worked with pretty much every organization. My stint, by the way, as a startup founder or a consulting guy, was an extension of that. You know, well, I had exposure to a lot of other functions within a company, but I just felt that I think I would want to do something on my own. And I realized that, and that was my first entry into building products. You know, I wanted to build some products. But just like these events, I've been attending events, a lot of conferences as a panelist, as a speaker, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of these friends or network that I had said, why won't you consult for us? You know, in terms of strategy, in terms of technology, and so on and so forth. How do you align technology? Where should we put our money in technology to better our business and stuff like that? So it became a consulting business as a single man person running it. So I had a good time running it as well. So.
Okay. So worth it, tried it, tested it?
So it was working as well, very, very well. And there's no regrets, of course, you know. But only regret would have been, would I have built, it was a consulting business. Would I have wanted to build a product? Yes, of course. You know. Maybe it's never too late. You know.
But still you got, I mean, the important part is that, you know, you got a dip in the other side as well. And I think if you are today on the other side, it's a wonderful combination.
It's wonderful. In fact, yes, I mean, post my, before my startup, I was with a company called Pearson. That was my first entry into a product company where our products are used by actual end customers. Before that, it was always on the IT services side of the business. You know, so that was one flip, and from there was running entire shop all by yourself is another jump as well. You probably have been doing that for a long time.
Absolutely. But one thing I could say for sure is that when you came to the other side, do you think your outlook towards your vendors changed?
Very much, very much. You know.
Oh
yeah. Totally. Relate as well as know the dark side of the other side. You know, you're on this side. I know what the heck you guys do. So you can't fool me now, you know, you can't bluff with me anymore. From Pearson, I kind of learned that as well. So.
Interesting. Okay, so now you've been, for the last couple of years, you've been in the publishing industry and have been instrumental in doing a lot of IT implementation work. Can you give us some insights on this industry, on the publishing industry, from an IT perspective? Right, the easy, the difficult, the ugly part.
Yeah. No, in fact, like I mentioned, Pearson was again a publisher. So my first entry into publishing or education happened with Pearson. Yeah. Well, so it's a very legacy industry if you kind of think about it. So publishing is probably one of the first aggregators, earliest aggregators in this world, 18th century. Centuries, right? You're talking what you call as Airbnbs and Ubers of today. I mean, they are aggregators, nothing but they're connecting sellers to buyers, right? I mean, that's really what it was those days. You're connecting some of the knowledge or content experts in specific subject domains and connecting them to buyers in whatever form or fashion products that you got into the market, right? Technology has played a tremendous role in this world. I mean, who would have thought that you could self-publish on Amazon? You could write your own book today. You don't need a publisher to do it. But having said that, the publishers bring in the quality and the rigor that you could never bring as a self-publisher, you know. So has it not transformed? Of course it has transformed hugely, you know, using technology. Some of the systems and processes has gone through 180-degree shift because of technology as well, you know, just like
digitization is the biggest.
Is huge. I mean, publishing as a company has been, look, just the way how banking changed to accept digital economy, publishing is going through that now, you know. I mean, for us, delivery of content has been pretty much what digital has been. But building new products and building new business models using digital economy is what is happening now. So tremendous opportunities in the publishing world if you just kind of think about it, you know, for a technologist to get in. Well, there are ugly sides to pretty much every industry, but I think it's a good place to be in at this point in time. You know, people are not going to stop reading, however you look at it. Maybe your attention spans might have come down, but you will definitely would want to not quitting on reading at all. Yeah.
Now, how have you grown as an IT individual in all these years? Plus, you've been very active in building technology captives, right? So, can you share some wins and losses from your experience?
Yeah. No, so I was a technologist. I started as a programmer. I've been in multiple industries. I started as a game programmer. Then I started building what is the term as platforms today, right? Facebook is a platform. was systems like that. You would call them systems when I started, right? Uh, then I moved into senior technology leadership roles as an architect, as a solution architect, as an enterprise architect. Then from Pearson days, I moved into technology sourcing / building technology captives for product organizations, right? Now, of course, I've graduated to a product role. So I've got access, information, knowledge, and intelligence now to understand how one products are built and how do you take it to market today. You know, that's really what I do as a product head. But coming back to your other question about what captives, what was my experience, you know, if you're building a captive, you're obviously doing it for a certain bunch of objectives. Let's assume a company in the US, it's a 250 man organization. Let's say, as an example, hypothetically, let's say they're a media company, right? They want to have a technology captive to build their platforms and systems and products here, digital products. One, you need to have certain objectives in mind as to what is your roadmap for the next 5 to 6 years, very, very clearly. And two, you got to consider the fact that you understand the culture specific of the country where you're trying to open the captive. It's very, very important, you know. People think, oh, it's about putting a bunch of programmers in a room and here you go, I'm a captain. This doesn't work, you know. That's important. And second is, look, there's a subtle difference between how we function and how America functions and how Europe functions as well. US, if I were to put you as a leader in a company, right, you would pretty much have to jump into water and learn to swim by yourself. In India, you're talking about gradually exposing people to industries, domains, and making them comfortable. That's where Europe works as well, you know. So outcomes and productivity isn't going to happen immediately. So you got to keep all these factors in mind before you, you know, come here. And the last point being that the access to talent is very, very competitive in India, you know. So I built a captive in Mumbai at Pearson at the Mindspace Malad. We grew to 220 man organization. We pretty much, you know, had looked at every available technology CV in Mumbai to get to the 220, you know. So it's very competitive to build. So you got to build a brand as well, you know, and to have as a company, you know, you got to have a brand and you got to differentiate yourself as well.
Differentiate yourself. Interesting. So any peculiar obstacles you faced and how did you overcome some of this?
In my career? No, absolutely, you know. So I've always been working for companies who's a MNC, at least since Pearson days, or even before that, as with clients, right? So cultural dynamics is a huge challenge in companies. You know, organizations, it's a huge challenge. How do you get buy-in in companies? This is one big obstacle. You got ideas, right? You got to, today, I mean, let's be honest, you run a business, you know, you got to make decisions with very limited data and information. Not everyone has got 100% data that you can make the right choice, right? So after that, in large organizations, it becomes about how people buy into your ideas and your thought process. That's a huge obstacle. Second thing is geographical, cultural challenges that you have, you know. My team in India is going to work this way, but just to inform about that complexity to someone in the Europe or in the US is another different obstacle as well. Absolutely. You know, so you go through all this, you learn and you kind of evolve, and those are things that you get as an experienced guy. Otherwise, in technology, you know, the entry to barrier as a technologist isn't pretty much not much now. You know, you can pretty much go to Udemy or one of the online portals and pretty much run any programming language today. You know.
Interesting. So now, you know, having known the fact that you started working pretty early, almost in your second year, did you have any mentors early on in your career, and how did they help you in molding you professionally? That's if you had a mentor.
Yeah. No, indirectly, yes. I mean, thankfully, you know, sports teaches you one thing, to react pretty much instantly, right? I mean, that's a very subconscious thing. I don't know, you know, it's very difficult to explain. If you were to write an email to a client who's shouting at you, you take your time and you say, you will probably strategize as to how I want to word this, what tone do I want to use, and so on and so forth. It just doesn't happen in sports. So what makes you learn in sports is observing. That's how I never had a direct mentor, but I always learned by observing. You know, a lot of my managers were very, very smart people in my career. Outside of sports as well, I'm initially talking about my jobs, right? And I can tell you communication skills, entrepreneurial skills, you know, ownership, having a sense of ownership, as well as some of how people approach to problems, solution using technology are some things that I've learned from some of these indirect mentors as well.